My name is Jerry Gill. Today is September 22nd, 2009. I'm visiting with Ed Jones from the Oklahoma State University campus in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is for the O State Storage Project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. And Ed, thank you for taking time to visit with us today. And I thought we might kind of start with the beginning. Could you share a little bit about where you grew up, about your family, and a little bit about your early life?
I'm from New York, Brooklyn, to be precise, and like many in the, I guess, early 50s, my family moved out to Long Island after suburbia developed, and I pretty much grew up out there, right near the ocean, and so I combined my private school education along with my interest in sports. So I did a little bit of surfing.
Now, yours is sports, but which sports were you interested in?
Mostly track, yeah.
Distance?
Distance running. And then we had access to surfboards, believe it or not, on Long Island. And so
big waves, huh?
So we did. Yeah, it was pretty rough. Water was really cold. And so that's primarily my background in terms of where I grew up. My father met my mother during the war, World War II, and she's from the Brooklyn area. He was stationed at Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn. Met her on a soldier's weekend, apparently, and at least that's the detail I have.
Where did your dad grow up?
He grew up in Virginia, and he's from Martinsville, Virginia, and so we would always spend part of our summer vacations going to see his family there. So I have so his family was fighting for the Confederates in the Civil War. I know that. So my mother was, pretty much on the northern side.
What did your dad do for a living?
He actually started driving trolley cars in Brooklyn, and then essentially moved through transportation, through really riding, doing charter buses, and then he moved into administration. So by the time he finished his career, he was kind of in charge of running this enormous transportation service, where he was scheduling, hiring, and so he moved from being on the road quite a bit to being not on the road at all. And so he essentially did that. I mean, he was this kind of salt of the earth man, and had to provide for the family in tough times, and that's what he did.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have two brothers and one sister. I am the third child, and I have a brother who lives in San Francisco. He's a humanities grant writer, and I have another brother who works in business in New York, and my sister is a grief counselor in New York. So she does death and dying services for people who either have sudden departures or others who, for whatever reason, need to be consoled after the loss of a loved one. So she's been doing that for quite a while. So we all do different things. I'm the only one who went into my oldest brother went into higher education for a while. He did attend the University of Texas at Austin, so he has a local connection. But he then decided to go into business for himself. So he does actually have a house now in Austin as well as in San Francisco. So he's done fine.
Were there any lessons, values you learned, from your family growing up that's impacted you and influenced you?
I think pretty definitively, my father and mother both had an amazing work ethic, and I've come from a background where I had to more or less just decide what I wanted to do. I mean, I had, we had very limited resources, and so I just worked early and have continued to work. So I've always had multiple jobs, and my mother thinks I still work too much, but I think I've always found work to be a very kind of calming occupation, and it allows you to kind of step back and decide after a certain point what you really want to do. And it allowed me to do that. I mean, I feel really fortunate that at the university, I like coming to work. And I always tell my students that if, there are opportunities for that. You may not always get maybe the financial reward you wanted, but I said there's a point where you say you can make a good enough living, and if you're doing something you really want to do as opposed to something you're really miserable at and you're getting overcompensated for, there's a trade-off. And so that's kind of what I've taken away.
And what did you mentioned a little earlier that you attended private school?
Yeah.
Is that correct? So was going through like prep school, junior high school, you went to private schools?
I did, and they were Catholic schools.
Mm-hmm.
My family raised me Catholic, and so I, until I went to the university, I didn't go to a public school. And my parents really sacrificed. I mean, I think that was a formative experience for me because they knew they couldn't afford to send me to university, but they said, "Well, we're going to try to get you in your grades are obviously good enough, and you can get into we'll get you into a private high school, and then you'll get trained properly." I think my high school had like a 99% placement rate in universities, and at a time when most, not everybody went, not like today. And so that worked out to be a good plan, and I was extremely appreciative because I knew they were really. My mother was working 2 jobs in order for this to happen. So it's taught me something. I've just become a new grandfather, so I understand now a little better.
Well, Ed, can you share a little bit about your undergraduate and graduate experiences? So what year did you graduate from high school?
I graduated in '68.
And then you went to college
I went to college in Connecticut, in Central Connecticut State University. It's a teacher's college, and I went there primarily because it offered me the chance to have a track scholarship at the same time that I could have, an affordable education. And they, as a 17-year-old, when you have people calling you up and saying, "We want you to come," I mean, it's not bad, So that's what I did. And I enjoyed it. I got a decent education out of the school, and so when I went to Ohio University for my graduate work, I was shocked to find I was ahead of the curve in terms of my training. So it all worked out.
You did your master's and
PhD at Ohio University in Athens. Yeah, that's the non-football Ohio school. Well, they have a football team, but I don't think that's something they really tout as they're trying, emerging out. So it's not Ohio State by any means.
So you were an English
major, history minor all the way. I've always combined those 2 interests quite a bit, and now the research I do is probably tinged more with historical materials than literary materials, and most of it is focused on 17th century poet John Milton. I edit the International Journal on Milton in the field, and we have the Milton Journal here on campus, and so much of my research requires me to go to England every summer because it's, to work in the National Archives or work in public record offices throughout the country, primary materials, manuscript materials, and so on.
Gotta ask you, why Milton? Most people wouldn't pick Milton.
I know. I think that, I was asked, I was fortunate that the journal, the Milton Quarterly, was at Ohio University. And I was asked to be the assistant editor because they always assign one graduate student to do that. And I remember telling the editor at the time, I said, "I don't feel comfortable. I don't know enough about him." I said, "Why don't you give me a year and I'll, study a little bit more, and I'll be beginning my doctorate, and we'll check back with me in a year." And he did. And I said, "I think I'm okay with this." And what I've discovered in that year was that, to my surprise, Milton wrote on such things as divorce on the grounds of incompatibility in the 17th century. Obviously something that has been more or less embraced in modern world. But he also wrote on the notions of liberty and tyranny and monarchy. So he was a great favorite among the founding fathers in our country. as a result, I started seeing these connections in ways, and I really like his emphasis upon independence and free will and private faith. Many of the concepts I think are pretty critical to me. I just think the notion of independence and the ability to frame, having a certain amount of responsibility and control over your own life is paramount to Milton. So it turns out that he does a whole lot more. It's not all in Paradise Lost. It's in these other works, as well. So that, and I've been amazed at how there's a lot to study with Milton. I've been at it for over 20 years, and I'm just starting to feel comfortable. I mean, it's just, there's a lot to study, and he's demanding. So that's how it's happened.
And can you tell me a little bit about your professional career before you came to Oklahoma State?
Yes, while I was a graduate student, I had a couple of opportunities to make a little more money, and we've already talked about how I always worked more than I probably needed to. And one of them was to teach humanities in a maximum security prison. And so I was asked by my department head if I would like to do this. They were looking for someone to do this. They said, well, the wage isn't great, but I said, well, I'm a grad student. The wage is great for me. And so I went down, and little did I know that for the next 8 years, I would be teaching regularly down there, and got to the point where it became almost a special skill, because what happened was I started working there, but then other opportunities came up to teach in minimum security prisons, medium security prisons in the Ohio system. And I kind of worked it up into a job, so that my first appointment after I finished my doctorate was as an assistant professor at a branch campus of Ohio University. And most of my assignment was to teach in prison. And then I parlayed that position. I mean, that's the position I was holding. I had a 3-year appointment, and I started my first year. And in the meantime, I applied for the job here, and I received it. So I also worked as, once my daughter was born, I went out and made sure I got a full-time job at a technical college, because I just, felt like I had to have more income. And so I was working full-time in a technical college while I was finishing my dissertation. And so I've had a variety of teaching experiences.
I'd say a variety would be a good choice.
Yeah, many things before I came here. Now, once I got here, it was kind of nice to just have one job.
Is there a story about how you got to Oklahoma State University? What influenced you?
I remember.
This is pretty much a stretch from where you are.
It is. The heartland
of America.
In English, I think, like in history even, I mean, you have to just play the entire market. I mean, so I was applying. I actually was in graduate school when the economy was really bad, which is usually a good place to be. And the year I came out, there was a huge set of openings for jobs, because the first wave of early retirements were being paid off. So I think I must have applied for 50 odd jobs just in Renaissance, the year I came out. And I remember my wife saying, well, I don't know about Oklahoma. I said, well, I'm not going to get a job in Oklahoma. Don't worry about it. And then when it all came out, I mean, I remember going to my interview, and I go into the interview room, and my department head was from Brooklyn. He was at Oklahoma State. And two of the other people that were on the faculty that were interviewing me were from New York. So I felt and we were in the Hilton, I think, in New York. And it just seemed to click really well.
Was Peter Robbins one of those?
No, it was Carol Moda was one, and then John Crane was the department head. Tom Warren was there, and so it worked out really well. And I had a couple of options, but they were so friendly, and I felt like it just seemed like a good fit. And I think it's worked out pretty well. I mean, I've been certainly pleased.
How long had David? I want to say David Berkeley, Dr. Berkeley.
He's
David.
the person I replaced.
I was going to ask you that if you took
I
his.
mean, I was told
Tough shoes to fill.
video. Yeah, I mean, I was told that from day one that, and I was shown a video of the person I was replacing. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, because I knew him because of the Journal. He subscribed to the Journal.
Mm.
So I couldn't figure out why they were advertising in Renaissance, because I said, well, he's there, and then the person who turned out to be one of my best friends, and still is, was also here named Paul Klemp. And I couldn't figure out why there would be an opening in Stillwater for yet another person in Renaissance. And it turns out when I got here that Dr. Berkeley was retiring. So, and he was always very gracious, and I think he was very supportive of my application.
Great gentleman.
Yeah, he was. So,
well, when did you first become engaged in Oklahoma State University with the Scholar Development and Recognition Program?
I remember.
How did you find out?
I remember running with. I've always run with Bob Grallman on Sundays or Saturday. I mean, once a week we usually run, and we've been doing it for a while. And I remember he was still working in the scholarship office, if I'm not mistaken, and he would say to me, "Well, it would be nice if we try to. I really think we have enough students here that, could qualify for some of these, and I'd like to try competitions. Would you be interested in helping out?" And I think we hatched a plan way back when. The details have become vague at this point, so long ago, but we thought if we could. I was getting at that point really, really good students in my English classes that were highly motivated and they were just good thinkers. And I thought these are just as good as anyone I met. And I like to see how they fare in the competitions. And I found out that Bob said, well, we can have people apply for Rhodes, and I came to understand the process. And we went through maybe 4 or 5 rounds whereby, a 4-point student in English who would go on to Harvard Law School would get an interview, but would never get anywhere, and never get out of the state round. I mean, the way they had it set up then, they had a state round, then they had a national round, and then one year, we've been doing this. Brian Begley and Jennifer Lyles. So there were a number of really good applicants. Steve Whalen. Many of them have gone on to very, very distinguished careers, either lawyers or several of them lawyers. And Brian, of course, is someone who's done really well in business. And he got really close. He was the one who they actually brought back for a second interview because they, and they never do that, but they thought that he was so good the first time. And he was the kind of guy, he was student body president here. He just would not back down. And so apparently the Rhodes Committee actually re-interviewed him, which they never do. And they decided against him. I mean, I think the line might have been like his grade point average was like 3.89. That wasn't high enough. In engineering.
Right, I remember.
It's just,
In Student Government Association president.
So they decided, well, we're going to pick somebody else. And but that was close. And then I think right after that, I remember I remember having this young man come over to my office and say to me, "I just dropped out of the engineering school. My parents are furious with me or something like this. I'm going to be an English major." And it was Blaine Gretaman. And I think having him as a freshman gave me a long time to work with him over 2 or 3 years. And what I discovered with Bob was that we needed to mentor these students individually, get them ready. And he was the first one that got through that process. Obviously, he's the only one we've been able to get to win a Rhodes Scholarship.
And I want to visit with you a little bit about that specifically a little bit. First of all, could we kind of more of a general sense kind of ask a couple of questions about, first of all, in what ways as a faculty member did you participate in the program as it was developing? And as a point of reference, this would be the late 90s?
Yes. Late 90s since. I mean, that's when we
since
started probably in the early 90s. weeks, just
Okay.
unofficially with
Okay.
Bob. Bob's program didn't start till the late 90s, right? He switched over to an individual office. And so keeping in contact with Bob, I would have students come into my office and I would talk to them about this process. Bob would talk to them about it as well. And then I would just work with them regarding their writing, what kind of classes they're taking, what kind of, I'd have discussions with them to kind of get a feel for what kind of thinker they were and whether they were interested. I mean, it was never one of these things where we just pushed it on people. There's a sense that you have to understand what a student is comfortable with. And if the student isn't comfortable with the position he's going to be put in or she's going to be put in, then the chances for success are pretty marginal. And so I tried through the writing of either in my own classes or looking at papers they'd written or statements that they would write up, I would get to know them.
What, Ed, it's sort of trying to get kind of the components of the program. It's a little bit different for each student. It's not exactly defined.
That's right.
Some of the components are one, you help identify students. And so you got, as a faculty, I'm thinking about as a faculty member, sort of the components that help identify prospective students to Bob Grauman and into the program.
That's right.
You visit with them, help them with their applications.
Right. Well, Bob would do more of that. I would do more of the kind of oral discussion about, well, what are you really interested in? Do you really want to put down that you like hike and you think this is a physical activity that it's really going to make a difference, or and so we go through some of the things, and then we do those mock interviews, which really helped out because they would then be able to recognize that, oh no, I can't believe what I said on camera. So we would do it pretty conscientiously. I mean, but it was again a small number of students. I mean, we would be talking maybe nothing like we have today. We'd be talking a half dozen people, and it wasn't at that time the kind of faculty support. I think whatever it is, most people just thought we were probably too crazy to be thinking Oklahoma's never going to be able to do that. Oklahoma State can't do this, And we just, I think, privately felt that we were going to show them otherwise, and we just stuck with it. And so it was a real, and Bob's program kept getting those Truman Scholars. See, so I had some exposure to them, but because that's a public policy issue and a program that I would talk to those students, but I never had them in individual sessions with me. Chris Stevens, I would, and there were a few of them, Brian even, but that was because he would take the class with me. So we had this situation with the Truman Scholarships. I mean, every year we were getting one of those. And then once in a while we'd get an opportunity for a Rhodes. We always got Rhodes interviews. Now what's troubling to me is that we're not getting interviews. We were getting interviews, I mean, pretty regularly, but we could never get out of the state interview. But anyhow, I think that to kind of bring it back to what you wanted, this now with the Scholar Development Program in place, along with the cooperation of the Honors College, I mean, the students have a lot of resources now. And we have a lot more students that will that take these. Like I was teaching a course in Cambridge this summer, and those courses are usually made up of really good students at the university, and many of them go on and then apply for these prestigious scholarships. So it's sponsored by that program, and the students are kind of very carefully selected for it. Just to cut down on the trouble that you could have if you don't have the right students.
You alluded to it earlier, maybe half a dozen kids. Now it's expanded. How many students?
Oh, I'd say now Bob deals with maybe 45 or 50. I mean, he's got all kinds of students that are with UDAL and all the various programs. Yeah, I mean the Gates, because he's done the Gates Cambridge. That's right.
Yeah, turn it the other side maybe. How about faculty? You're talking about at first, there's a handful of crazy faculty involved in this.
Maybe 3 or 4.
A couple of questions.
Yeah.
Well, how important are faculty to the program?
Oh, they're absolutely essential. I mean, but the problem is that, let's give the students their due, but if they don't know what they're up against, I mean, we're up against. Let's take Harvard. I think Harvard is allowed 50 applications for a Rhodes Scholarship. We're allowed one.
Whoa.
So I mean, they're going to have people on campus devoted to helping those students. And so because they know that you have to understand the network first of all. Now, one of the advantages that I've been fortunate to have is because of my research, I have actually contacts over in Oxford. I work in Oxford fairly regularly, and in Cambridge. And so as a result, I mean, I always find this out afterwards, but I'll get a message from someone who will say, "Oh, Edward, I'm really pleased to know that your student applied. Of course, he got it." But they can't say that, until it's all over. But these things happen, and so I discover now that, Oklahoma State is identified by certain people I know, primarily through me, and if they're in English, that there's a connection there, and they at least know someone there, and so that makes a huge difference. But the faculty, absolutely critical. I think Ed Miller's a great example. Doran Recker's done a lot. There are several people that have been very, very helpful, and they've participated both as instructors, as referees, writing letters of recommendation, and I think, without being idealistic, the best thing about it is that these faculty members simply believe in what they're doing. It's not about what they can get out of it, because to me, it's gratifying to go over to England, which I've done for the last 12 years. I've always had an OSU student over there that I can say, "Hey, would you look this up for me?" and I just got notice from Joel Halcomb yesterday that he finished his degree.
Great.
So I mean, those kind of things really, they're gratifying. I mean, because you think of guys that start out here as undergraduates, and Kelsey Williams is now working with a couple people that I know really well at Oxford on a research program. They both told me, he was trained marvelously at Oklahoma State, and that's what we want. So,
picking up on your comments, Ed, a little bit, in what ways are faculty enriched by their participation in the program? We think of the students being enriched, but in what ways are faculty enriched?
I think that, in my case, if I use myself as this, I just think that it validates what you do. I mean, I'll admit, I like teaching in the Honors College. I don't apologize for it. And I like students that are willing to work hard and accomplish. And if they accomplish it, what we're showing is that it doesn't matter where they come from. Most people would not think of Oklahoma State as a school that's going to have people studying at Oxford or Cambridge, but it just shows that can happen if they have the proper training. They're given a little bit of help from faculty. I mean, we can't write anything for them. They just have to do the work themselves. But the nice thing about the student body here, and I've talked to this with my East Coast friends, there's no entitlement here, which is a huge advantage for faculty, because the students are willing to, they may not be trained as well as perhaps other students in other parts of the country when they come in, but they're really open to being trained, and they're willing to work hard. There's something about a simple work ethic here which I really like, and if you can connect with them, they'll just work, and they'll do what you tell them. I mean, if you just kind of give them advice, and they're young kids. I mean, so as a result, they're going to make decisions that you say, "Oh, that wasn't a good one," but it's okay.
You alluded to Ed Miller earlier, and I had the opportunity to visit with Ed a couple weeks ago, and Ed talked about faculty that enjoy teaching, that there's that reward of seeing that, being able to communicate with students and see them grow and get excited about their area and their field, and to stretch themselves and to grow. Is that part of that reward you get?
I think, in my case, it's been really special for me, because I now go on my own research trips, and I'll have one of my former students join me and do his own research in the same archive I'm doing, and we'll trade off. Like I've done this with Blaine, I've done this with Joel Halcomb, where they'll do they know how to do all the technology. I'm just like books and manuscripts. So we take the pictures, So they'll take out their digital camera and they'll have everything labeled and put on my computer, and I'm just really grateful. But it's really gratifying to see them come and do the kind of work. I mean, not very many go into the profession. Let's face it. I mean, they'll go into other things. But I'm on a panel in Venice this spring with Blaine. I mean, we both independently applied for this conference, and we both got put on the same panel. And that's kind of a nice thing. I got to introduce a student in Oxford last spring. I was a featured speaker, and I was able to chair the session in which Kelsey Williams, a former student of mine, was one of the panelists. So those kind of things are really kind of neat, I think. I mean, you feel like you've really done something concrete for somebody.
You talked about earlier about being active in teaching in honors courses, in the honors college program. How do college honors programs in the university honors college, how do they influence and support the scholar development program?
Well, I think the combination of the two Bobs, who seem to have different visions, but they recognize talent, that there's a direct correlation. I mean, that college doesn't have, it's not universal, and we should never assume that the rest of the university, if you're not in the honors college, you're not doing good work. But the numbers seem to suggest that the highest motivated group of students on campus tends to be out of that college. And that college is university-wide, so it's not discipline specific, which simply means, okay, and there are ways that you can get an honors certificate. I mean, it's not like you have to do all honors courses, but I think they like the fact that they get a couple of extra little perks by being in the honors college, and it's a reward for their willingness to work. They all seem to understand the scholarship game, so they apply for scholarships, but it's also because I think they feel comfortable with what they're doing as a program. I get freshman students, and so I kind of like them because they're really open. I mean, they're usually conflicted about, well, mom wants me to do this, but I really want to do that. And I tell them, well, give it a year, then tell mom. They want to go a different direction. But I mean, if you're doing well, then they don't have a problem with that.
What percentage, Ed, would you say of students that are in the scholars program, development program, are also or started in the honors program? How much of an overlap is there?
I'd say 75%. I mean, it is. I would assume that's at least that high because, it's a hard. I can't think of too many of the applicants that I've dealt with that haven't been in that college. And again, they come from engineering, they come from ag, they come from humanities, business. So there's a high correlation. I mean, there may be a few that just were kind of off the radar. But what happens is they come in and they get scholarship offers. And so I think the system that Bob Grauman uses and Bob Spurrier, they ask faculty to identify students of ability. So faculty will send notes in to the Scholar Development Office and say, this is a guy that you should be looking at, or this is a woman who is really highly motivated and doing really well. And then both agencies or both programs, if they haven't already contacted this person, will and talk about, well, what do you think? I mean, these are some of the advantages of being in the program. And it's not required. We've had students go through that have not been in it, but for the most part, I'd have to say that, in my experience alone, and I've been with Bob more or less from the beginning of the scholar development program, they've been almost always from the honors college.
You alluded to kind of another common denominator. There's research, and how important is the freshman research program in the WINS research programs to
Yeah.
the scholar program? And what's the
I
connection
think
there?
that I don't deal with the freshman program. What I do is I tell my students in honors about the projects that are available through the WENS program, and I tell them, you don't realize what an advantage you have here. I said, as a scholar myself, to get a $5,000 grant is considered a big grant. I mean, in humanities, you have a chance to get one for $4,500, and you're an undergraduate student, and you get it for the whole year. I said, you really should think about that. I said, maybe not the first time around. Go for just the WENS scholarship to kind of get a feel for the program, but then. You do that WENS project. I've had Kelsey Williams did his with me, and it turned out to be the project that he ended up writing his MA thesis at Oxford on. So he switched it a little bit, and it became, in some respects, related to his research at Oxford. So there are lots of advantages to that. I think that I really try to tell them that that's going to tell you many things. It'll tell you whether you're really cut out to do research. It'll also pique your interest in a project. So, and many of them, I remember having a student years ago who just wanted to do a WENS project on the Pioneer Woman statue in Ponker City. And she did. She just, went up and did all the historical research, I guess, in the Oklahoma Historical Society library, and went to Ponker City and found out about the statue. Did this paper, didn't do it for me, but I read it. It was a paper on the status of women in Ponker City and why that statue is up there. And it was pretty interesting stuff. And she went on to do an MA at University College London. So, there are some, I've had students that have done two of them. If they start early on in their junior year, they actually are eligible. They could get one their sophomore year going into the junior, and their junior year going into their senior. There aren't too many schools around the country that give $9,000 to undergraduate students to do research projects.
Isn't it significant in a couple ways? It just seemed like I picked up the conversation, maybe you can validate this, that in addition to expanding them as researchers and to getting them into their field to see if they're interested, as you were talking about, another obvious benefit of that has been if you're in competition for one of these prestigious national, to have done that kind of undergraduate research is pretty impressive, isn't it? On resume?
Absolutely. And the committees will ask about that. Mm-hmm. And I again tell them that, there's really no substitute for that. If you're looking to stay in the academy, this is going to be a very obvious thing for an arts and science student. If you're going to go into business or you're going to go into agriculture or something, it's also going to be considered field work. So it's a practical application. And when I get letters back when I write for students to go to medical school and law school. And I've been telling my current students this just recently. They're not worried. What they keep writing to me is they're not worried about the specific training of a doctor or a lawyer. They said, we can take care of that. What we need are students that know how to write, know how to think,
express themselves.
That's what they really want. They said, we'll take care of the other stuff. That's where we're falling down. And that's where you guys are coming in and giving us the kind of training we need.
So the research program going through helps them practically in a lot of ways in terms of application for jobs after they graduate, for graduate school, mm-hmm. for finding out about their interest in honing their skills in research, and also preparing them for competition for prestigious scholarships.
Absolutely.
So a whole lot of things engaged in that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a crowning project. I can't remember the name, but it's a capstone experience in some respects where everything kind of comes together, and a lot of them, of course, will then adjust that for their honors college thesis because that becomes their major project. And you leaving a university at 21 or 22, that is your major accomplishment. You can look back and say that's the project that put my stamp on my undergraduate career. A lot of undergraduates don't have that kind of experience.
I was going to ask you about that. Isn't that unusual for most undergraduate students across the country to have that kind of research and work with the professors side by side?
Yeah, it's unusual.
It usually occurs at the graduate level and beyond.
When I found out that they had this opportunity, I was just astonished. And it's the Wentz program that affords it. And I'm just glad they take advantage of it. And they don't, I mean, what I've seen over the years are really good projects come out of it. It's not just window dressing. Oh, I'll take the money and run. Or, the projects get done. The supervisors have been very conscientious, and the students, I think, come out of it feeling gratified. I mean, it's painful. I mean, I think it's really difficult, but I still think in the end they're really happy about it.
Is there any components that we haven't talked about that have been important to the Scholar Development Recognition Program? We've talked about identifying students, the honors program, we talked about the Wentz research part of it.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about preparation, coaching, preparation for applications, how to write those appropriately,
Right.
giving mock interviews. Are there any components we've missed?
I don't think so. The only thing perhaps that we, and this is just a cultural thing, I mean, at the university level, it would be nice to, convince other disciplines of the need for flexibility. I think that's the handicap. In certain disciplines, there's so little room to go off of your program grid.
For electives and additional courses.
So that I think we fall down in that area, and I hold back, but I can see it pretty quickly in a student coming out of with no humanities background, and it's not just because I'm in humanities, but it's just the fact of life that these kind of competitions, if you do not show breadth and kind of a range of interests, they're not necessarily going to look at that favorably. And it can be as simple as what is your favorite book. And if you come up with just kind of an answer, it's just really lame. I mean, it's just not going to work. And we've had students in the mock interviews where that's happened, and you have to remain positive. But I'm just sitting there saying no chance, because there's just not enough exposure to the world at large. And I think sometimes, the academy is narrow enough. I mean, we can get into our little cubby holes and study our Milton or study our Shakespeare, and the rest of the world can go on nice and merrily. Thank you very much. But I think when you're coming to something like a scholar program and preparing students, they have to have a wider perspective. And the science students will be the first to. I mean, they tell me privately. They not necessarily tell their science professors or the engineering professors, but they know they're under some limitations, and so they have to go and try to do something on their own, because they know that their program doesn't really allow that latitude. So that would be the only thing I would love to see a little bit more leeway there, where there was a little more built-in room for saying, maybe our students in the engineering sciences need to have a little bit more exposure to the other colleges, just in terms of the diversity curriculum. And that doesn't, you don't want to have them staying forever. I mean, I don't mean that, but just enough. I mean, I think they have like 6 hours, and that's just, if one of them is like writing and one of them is reading, I mean, that's not going to be enough. Not for 4 years. And you come out of a university with 4 years of training, and you've had like one writing class.
International educational opportunity is important also.
Well, I think since most of these awards are either located or foster international travel to get there, I think that, and we've been good at that. I think Oklahoma State has really, I think she's our current provost, who will no longer be shortly, but she really fostered that, and I've been really happy about the fact that they're aware of it. They need to get out and get exposed, and that's always going to be helpful. The Rhodes people always look for some idiosyncrasies, like I climbed Everest or something, or I teach. I teach some very, very specific group, some bizarre, language or something, and they love stuff like that because it's just kind of different. But you can try to also scheme that, and it's just so transparent. You can do it. You either have to be that kind of person, or you can't. I try to tell them that you can't be someone you're not. The committee sees through that. Like, they don't even have to keep their eyes open. They just have to listen to you. They can tell you're fake. So you never want to go in and just not be yourself. And if you don't win, that's not really, you shouldn't go in with a high expectation to win. What you should go in with is a high expectation for the experience. Yeah. Because so many little things can happen to not win. The end game is not always the winning.
Let me ask you about that. What do you, you've probably known some students who were unsuccessful.
More than not.
In their requests for prestigious scholarships. What do you tell the students who don't compete successfully? I mean, were they failures, or did they benefit in other ways?
No, usually, they'll say, well, I didn't win, but I'm going on to, Brown University on a scholarship. I said, that's really not so bad. So they have fallback moves. Most of them are going to succeed anyhow. The question is, and we try, I think Bob does a good job of that, and I try to second it. I tell them, we think you'd have a shot. Now, we're not saying you're going to win. I think it'd be a good experience for you to go through this process. And I think you need to approach it that way. If you get through the first stage and you get to the second stage, that's a really major accomplishment. I mean, because what's happened is when you get into this mix of students, and these are the top students in the country, and so just to be invited to that puts you in at a very, very different level, and you'll sense that when you go to these places. I mean, when the Gates committee finishes their work and they interview 80 people and they pick 50, I mean, the first thing they always say is they're all obviously really good, because if you can't get the scholarship, if you can't be accepted into Cambridge, I mean, they won't give it to you. So you can, if nothing else, you can say, well, I was accepted as a graduate student at Cambridge University, and that's not a small accomplishment, So I think that, and you're right, I've talked to many, many more who have failed than succeeded. And most of them take it really well. I mean, a couple of them I know, one's in Paris. He's been living in Paris now for 7 or 8 years. And he just thought it was a really good experience. And he was a little more, it rolled off him a little better. Some don't. I mean, some it really devastates them because they've never lost. And I'm just saying, oh, welcome to the real world. You finally lost something.
Well, expand that just a little bit. How, specifically and generally, in what ways are students enriched by their participation in the scholarship? What winners and non-winners of scholarships, just collectively? I think that the best evidence I can cite is when we have the end of the year ceremony, and Bob usually does this really nice thing where he says, well, we're going to give a little recognition to some of the people who didn't win, but they got, they were a finalist or semifinalist, and then he usually hands them a little envelope with something in it, $50 or something, to go and I don't know, do something during the summer. And so I think that for the most part, when they go through this experience, we don't have to say anything to them, because they recognize that this has shaped them
to see the academic community and their careers in a different light.
Mm-hmm.
They have been exposed to competition at a high level. They no longer have these idealistic notions of what it means to succeed in a particular area. They've actually experienced it, and it serves them well. They move right on and go to law school. Half of them usually go to law school or go to medical school, or they'll go into MBA programs, or study for another degree. We've had two people I know that have. Well, you probably know one of them, Josh. I'm trying to remember his last name, but he's the young man that was in charge of. He was one of the founding students of that alumni program that students give back to the university, and he's connected with the foundation, I think, or the alumni center, one of them. And he's now at Cambridge at another program. I mean, he just found this program after he went to take a course at Cambridge, and he's been really enjoying it quite a bit.
I guess just as a person, they're stretched in so many
Absolutely.
ways. They're broadened their perspective, their understanding of
And
themselves.
think
and life
Yeah,
and
and when you
nature.
think of where they come from, and when I'm just always astonished when I had a student in my office right before I came over here who said, "Well, I'm from Davis, and everybody in town is related to me."
Merry cousins.
That's probably he has 7 brothers and 4 sisters, and they all have those kids. And she said, it's really nice. It's to come to campus when no one knows me, because everybody knows me. I get pulled over for speeding. The police officer says, "I'm not going to write you up, and I'll tell your father anyhow." So it's one of those things that they kind of find the next step in their identity, and the program just becomes exciting for them.
And mention that, I got to thinking that I believe that Shannon Farrell and Blaine Gator, both their high school senior class, are about 30 people in their class.
Blaine's was 15, I think.
It's 15,
Yeah.
that's small.
Yeah, Shannon's was a little bigger, but not much. Yeah. This woman today, so hers was 41.
Big school.
Yeah, big school, So, and she said she transferred to Blanchard or something. So.
Well, Ed, we talked earlier, you were talking about Blaine Gretaman being our first Rhodes Scholarship winner. And a couple of questions. Can you talk about the process for preparing Blaine for his Rhodes Scholarship and development, using him as an example, kind of walking Blaine through?
I think I had Blaine in an honors humanities class when he was a freshman. He became an English major, and then I had him again in a Shakespeare class. I think by the time I had him in my senior Milton seminar, we were pretty far along, and he was a junior, but it's a senior level class, and that's when I realized I had an opportunity to kind of help him. I mean, he was doing all of the student newspapers that was getting himself into controversial situations. I mean, it's just Blaine, and so he was always writing editorials for the paper, and he was involved in other political activities. And I always dealt with him in the context of, his areas of study and how these experiences all kind of made up who he was. And we would talk about, and in conversations, I would ask him what range of experiences he had coming from a small town. And he had a wide range of experiences, believe it or not, and always a curious individual. And I think his curiosity, intellectual curiosity, turned out to be his outstanding talent, because he has it still today. I mean, I can see him walk into a room with people I know, and he just knows they get engaged with him. It's just, some people are like that. So he's got an infectious personality in that way. And Blaine just needed to be kind of smooth out a little bit around the edges. I mean, he was kind of a really personable, likable guy, but he was just a little rough in terms of the decorum, perhaps, that you might need for a roads interview. And so we worked on that with him quite a bit, and we would have, just different sessions in which I would ask him a whole bunch of really off the wall remarks and questions and ask him to respond to them. And he would. I mean, he just had this ability to kind of range over popular culture, politics, and religion, and there wasn't a subject that he didn't have a comment on. And I try to tell students that not everyone's going to have that kind of personality, but there's no reason why you can't have that kind of range of knowledge. And so that's something that maybe set him apart. And the committee, he probably told you this story about the interview when he had the committee singing Merle Haggard songs. I mean, you just can't do that for the most part in a roads committee. I mean, you're talking about these people who look at themselves as serious scholars.
Classical musicians.
Yeah, and we had one conversation. I remember he was writing a paper on Steinbeck. He had been reading Steinbeck, and he was going to do his once project on Oklahoma's reception to the Grapes of Wrath. That's what he was doing. And I remember one day I had just been listening, just by accident, to a Bruce Springsteen album that had come out that year called The Ballad of Tom Joad. And it was maybe 13 or 14 songs, and they were all dealing with this notion of the Tom Joad figure, or pilgrimage and pilgrims like him. And it just kind of dawned on me, and I when I saw Blaine, I said, you've been working on this thing with Tom Joad, and when you come around to doing your roads essay, you might think about linking it to Bruce Springsteen, who's also doing something, that's popular culture. And that's what he did. And I think the essay worked marvelously, his application essay for the roads. And then it was easy. I mean, he just bowled the community. I mean, he told me that the applicants that year for the roads in Oklahoma said, well, they all knew he was going to get a spot. It was just a question of who was going to get the other ones. He got to the finals and they said the same thing. Well, we know he's going to get one, but it's just who's going to get the other three. So, I mean, that was pretty amazing, to me, because I thought, this guy's pretty rough. And you wouldn't think of him as being an Oxford automatic. Kelsey Williams is an automatic Oxford type, but Blaine is not. He's just he's Oklahoma, and in his own little way. So,
in Lexoloki, what were your feelings when you first learned of Blaine's been selected?
Oh, I mean, I remember Bob got the call, and we went out and, of course, celebrated. Had a drink, and a glass of wine, and said, we finally did it. I mean, it was a sweet moment for us, because we were, we had more or less been told, implicitly by others, that you guys are just, silly. You're never going to get this to happen. And then when we got the call, it was in Salt Lake, I think that's where he was interviewed. And so we went up to the airport to get him the next day. We were there with the welcoming committee. OSU put a welcoming committee together, and it was so much fun to see him, spiky hair and whatever. I mean, he just never, he just came up with this bizarre approach. And so it was really fun. And I, to this day, I mean, he's continued on. I really thought he would get out of the academy, because he was working for Time Magazine in London for quite a while after his first degree. And I thought, he's just going to do that. His academic life is too narrow. Yeah.
What was you gonna?
Are you done? Boy, we've been talking a long time. So I
So-
can't remember what I was saying.
We were just talking about Blaine, kind of the
Right.
reception of getting the
Yeah,
first
and
Rhodes Scholar.
we had a very nice media blitz the next week or so at OSU, and I think it worked out pretty well for them.
Well, kind of on a similar subject, but a little bit different. You alluded to the fact that we had a lot of success with our Truman Scholar
Right.
recipients, and in fact, we were recognized as a Truman
Institution,
Scholar
yeah.
institution. How important was that to Oklahoma State University?
I think it was very, very important. It actually, because of Lewis Blair, who was the director of that program, it kind of put us in a select category. And therefore, with Bob doing his recruiting, we were just able to kind of maintain that as a consistent winner year after year. It was the reason, one of the reasons why this national organization now, Faculty Advisors, has been created, that Bob Rowan was part of the founding figures in that. And it was born out of the fact, among other things, that we want Rhodes Scholarship, because I remember the Chronicle of Higher Education pointed out that, what's going on here, like the new kids on the block, so to speak. I mean, we're getting people from like Oklahoma State, winning a Rhodes Scholarship. What happened to the Ivies just always dominated. And so there was a 2 or 3 year window in there where in fact that changed. And a lot of schools saw the success that we had and decided to organize an office. Kansas State has a very good office, they always have. And Bob, I think, used them as a prototype. They were just always getting awards. And then we ended up, I remember going to a couple of those conferences with Bob, and people were very excited from all around the country. And they were setting up these programs with different kinds of resources, different kinds of plans. And that, in some ways, Bob has said we've created a monster that's been our own undoing, because now these schools are, we've just increased our competition, unwittingly. And so they have a lot of those in place. And it's schools that have a lot of resources are really serious about it. A lot of the state universities are getting into that.
So we're changing direction just maybe, and I want to get back to comment a little bit before we conclude. But how does, in your opinion, how does the scholar program, how does it mesh with other academic and scholarship programs across the campus?
I think I'm repeating myself a little bit. I think that I think the joining point is the Honors College, because a lot of these students live, I taught a course this summer, it's a perfect example. I taught a course this summer in which 5 students in that class all lived in the same dorm. They knew each other, they traveled together. They're from different disciplines, but they're all in the Honors College. And so they all know one another, they live in an honors dorm. And the chemistry in the class was spectacular as a result of it. So I think what happens is that these become the student leaders in different programs. And if there's a Spanish club or if there's a physics club, these people are probably in that. Now, I can't say how each how each department fosters its students. I know in the A&S College, a lot of departments have honors directors. We have one in English. I'm not sure. I couldn't estimate how the interfacing at that level goes. But I don't think there's any doubt that when you go to the A&S banquet at the end of the year, or you go to the top 10 ceremonies, that you see departments willingly promoting their top students, because this is kind of an achievement for them as an identity, and they become, featured on their website as well.
Yeah, a little bit of the flip side of that. Are there individuals who have concerns that maybe too many resources are being invested in a small number of students in our scholars program, and that maybe the money could be more broadly spread across the campus?
I think that I have heard that, and I certainly understand that response.
What do you say to these people?
Part of what I say is that it's not like you're not eligible for the honors program. And I said, what higher institution of learning does not want to promote its best products. I mean, this is counterproductive to like submerge the students that are like achieving and saying, well, no, we want to bring them back into the fold. I think there's a reason why leading institutions in the country, and you can go to the websites of any state university and you will find if they have a Rhodes Scholar, that's like right at the front. I mean, so it's just kind of common sense that you would say, we want to promote these students. Now, the argument is, do I take away general student resources to bestow them on others? No, I don't think you should necessarily do that. I think the WENS program has actually mitigated that a little bit. And I think in the WENS trust, I mean, the way Trish Houston has run that, I mean, she's abided by the guidelines and she's fostered the kinds of things that I think Mr. Wentz wanted. So I don't have any objection to that. That money is, I'm not sure if that money is supposed to just be, those resources just supposed to give to anybody who goes to university. So I think that, you know, it's a legitimate concern. There's no question about it. But it is a public land grant. And I think we have to, if we can showcase our accomplishments through a set of students, that helps the image of the entire university. And in the end, if we look at what happened with the endowed chair thing and the foundation, the gift giving, I think people want to gift for scholarships, for learning activities. And I think that's helped. I mean, it wasn't, in my mind, it wasn't an accident that Courtney Timmons was on the program with Boone Pickens when President Hargis made the announcement about the endowments, the chairs, that whole big gift to the program for the university, because she was a direct recipient she benefited from all the different activities, but she also like contributed to the campus. I mean, she did a university-wide recycling program. It wasn't like she just took her money and went off and did her own little thing. I mean, she actually came back and did something for the university at large. So these are participants, these students participate in the whole university, many of them. They're not just sitting in their, you know, little library cubicle and doing private research. So in some ways, it's not just the scholar development program, because the WENS program gives scholarships out to huge numbers of students on campus. So that would be one way of answering.
What should be in your mind? What should be the goals, desired outcomes of the scholars program?
Well, I think we've accomplished several of them. I think that I believe in a payback mechanism. It's an implied payback that you at some point in your life you reflect on what educational opportunities or what life experiences you were able to have from the university. And then as resources permit, you come back and foster that. So what I've been really happy about, and I see it in the Cambridge program particularly, we teach a course every summer in modeling Cambridge. The students that were in that program before or are now like Brian McLaughlin was finishing a PhD, those students came over and joined in with they're no longer OSU students, but they came and they fostered the environment for the current students. They came back and they did it because, and Joel is a perfect example. He says, I mean, the university did all the stuff for me. I mean, I would not have a Gates Scholarship if it wasn't for OSU and its faculty and administration. I want to give something back. I want to come back and make those students have a good time while they're in Cambridge. I want this program because it fostered my interest. It helped me. It was a gateway for me. And so they've all done that. I mean, Brian McLaughlin's done it. Joel Halcomb, Blaine Chris Stevens, they've all come back and done really good things for current students. They're not invisible. They didn't, make their mark and leave. They still come back and do things for students that come back on campus. So
Shannon Farrell.
Sharon Farrell is another example. He's come back as a faculty member, yeah. So he's a great example, and he's done. Shannon was in that really early wave. He just makes me realize how old I am. He was like way back there. And Blaine too, but he was before Blaine even, I think.
Chris Stevens and Shannon Farrell and Blaine they were together. Probably might have been about a year difference between them.
Yeah, so I think Shannon might have been 96, Blaine was 98, Chris might have been 97 or something like that. We were on a roll there. But yeah, those guys were, they were real path blazers because they actually achieved the success that legitimated the proposal to make a special office, because without that, that's why Bob had a special office. He was just in scholarships, but I think the success with the Truman, the success with the Marshall, that's what did it. You're not going to get a program based on one Rhodes Scholarship. So it's all the other scholarships that did it, really.
Talking about the recent successes, we've had program. Has any of that translated to recruitment of academically gifted students? Have you noticed? Is there a buzz out there amongst high school students about OSU?
There has been. I know Bob's taken several of these individuals we've mentioned on speaking trips and to other high schools, and it has made a difference. I think that I've had students who naively have said, "Well, if Blaine Gretaman can get a Rhodes Scholarship, I can." I said, "Fine, we'll help you." It's not that easy, and and they were like really determined that they would get it, but they didn't. But we've had students who were inspired by that. I know in the first few years after he won, it made a big difference. Now, the word gets out like anything else in the academy. So I think like Renee Hale is a perfect example she's in engineering, electrical engineering, I think, or chemical engineering. And she's going to go over on a special scholarship to Cambridge this year. But I talked to her as a freshman, and 4 years later, she's in the program, she's all ready to go, and she followed in the footsteps of her sister. So the students passed the word on, actually. I've gone down to the Oklahoma School of Science and Math and talked. And they're not big on humanities people down there, but they do come up and talk to you. And
surprised they let you in.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But they were really, really, really cordial. And they said, "Oh, well, some of us are coming up to OSU, so that's not. I'd like to think that the national pool could be a little bit better, but that's any university. We're regional, but we're doing better regionally. We can compete now. Our biggest competitor is Arkansas, I think, because they have all that Walmart money. So it's pretty tough.
Kansas and Arkansas both pretty stiff competition for us in scholarship.
Yeah, they are. So.
Well, you alluded earlier about, it kind of led into my next question when you were talking about we created sort of our own monster by helping foster other similar scholarship, scholar development offices. Right. And of course, the competition had already been fierce for these kinds of scholarships, and now it's even tougher.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Having said that, what changes do you think OSU is going to need to make in the future, going down the road, and what components might need to be enhanced to remain competitive?
I think Bob has been able to, he's made a few decisions recently that I think will really help. One of the things he did was he hired an assistant to run the freshman research program, who was a former student of the program. He's on a Javits scholarship here as an English graduate student. And he was the overseer of the program at Cambridge this summer. And he's worked really well with the students, and so, there'll need to be a few people in place that understand the culture. I think the difference with scholar programs is it's not just winning an award. It's kind of understanding, what are the ingredients that go into it? What does the student have to have? And, what assistance, ethical assistance can the university administration official and the faculty members give? I mean, there is this issue. I mean, you can't have faculty members too involved because the work has to be the students. And so when it comes to looking at those letters, you have to be really careful about how much help you can give. And I think that's something that Bob has understood well. The question is that there'll obviously need to be people in place in the future that understand that as well. So he's taken the first step in terms of, getting a person in a position that is becoming familiar now with this. And he's in his late 20s maybe. So I think things like that we'll have to do. The competition, I don't think, is going to go away. Competition is simply going to remain. It's going to remain what it is, and it's going to be, the success rate will depend upon getting, the better students, and that are, that they have the right perspective on the process. I've already been able to identify students who are going about this for the wrong reason. And luckily, we've not had too much of that. But there are a few students that have come into this process because they wanted to make a name for themselves. I said, that's not what we're doing this. We're doing this for it's not about the attention you're going to get. It's about the program, And so there are certain people that's just how they think. They think in terms of their mentality is, personal reward and fame or recognition and so on. And I think that in a scholar program like this, that's not the goal. I mean, that's kind of the aftermath of it. You get that as part of the process, but if you go into it with that as your goal, I mean, you're probably not going to succeed.
What will the university have to think about additional resources? I remember my conversation with Shannon Farrell. Shannon talked about maybe getting more faculty involved, not in the correct way, as you're saying, but more numbers involved, identifying and working with students. We had a conversation around maybe we need to give some little bit of leave time, maybe quarter time or something at different times for people to work with students and to guide them and counsel them.
Well, I certainly would never object to that, but
Pie in the sky.
Yeah, I think it's probably idealistic because, the current climate is, the professors aren't on campus enough as it is, So, I mean, that's always been it. I mean, people don't understand. I mean, how different professors in different professions work different ways. And, I don't write on campus. I write at home on my study. I mean, that's where all my resources are. And other professors, if they're at home, they can't stay there because they're just going to watch TV. They're doing everything. So they know they have to come to their office to work. Mine is just the opposite because, if I'm on campus, then I'm assuming that my students are going to want to talk to me, and so I'm not going to get anything done. And then you close your office door and someone knocks on it and you act like you're not in there. That's pretty bad. So it's a different perspective. But I think that maybe not like leave time, but maybe some recognition at the service area for a person's career.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always have it as an item it's always mentioned in my A&D that I do this work.
Consideration for tenure, for promotion, and different.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. I mean, I think that can help. I mean, it's just another item that I don't worry about because it's just something I do. But, other people are, there's a difference between a multitasker and, like a couple of taskers, when you do one or two things. And so, for me, this is just something that fits in my schedule. I don't need to have like 2 weeks devoted to it, and stuff like that. I mean, I may spend more than that with students, but I like to keep it kind of informal. I might meet them at a coffee shop and say, bring your essay, we'll talk about it. I want to get a cup of coffee.
Well, you've devoted a lot of hours at this program. Your name's come up from different people about your passion from the time you put into it. What keeps you motivated? What excites you about the program that keeps you involved and giving your time?
I think it's always the fact that it's hard to do. And part of it is that it's something I would have loved to have done as a student, and no one ever alerted to me about the possibilities. What I discovered in my own training was that I didn't want to be one of those professors who didn't tell their students what was available to them. So I think I'm partly motivated by the fact that I just want others to have the opportunities that I didn't have. And I can share vicariously in the success of that. So, and like I said, there's nothing sweeter for me to see my students at Oxford, Cambridge, NYU, whatever, doing work. I mean, it's kind of, what do we have besides our research in terms of our job? I mean, our books and articles. I mean, our students are our legacy. And so, I mean, that's just why I do what I do.
This is probably maybe just an overlap with my previous question, but just to nail it, what has given you more than anything else the most personal and professional satisfaction of being engaged in this program?
I think that my students turning into friends. That in other words, they've been my students, but now they're
colleagues.
They're colleagues, yeah. And I think that's been a really nice development. Some of them don't know what to call me. Blaine is a perfect example. He calls me hey, I mean, he's just uncomfortable, but he'll get over that eventually. I told him it's Edward, I mean, that's what I go by, and, that's just call me that, don't worry about it. And he just, okay, I'll try. And then it's funny, if there are 3 people in the room and he has to refer to me, he'll do it. But if it's just between the 2 of us, he just can't. He can't do it yet. And Joel has made the transition, a little bit better. I just think, God, it's driving Elizabeth crazy. If she just can't handle it. Why are they calling you this? We had him in our house, we spend all this time with them, and they can't, figure out what to call you. So it's like, it's just, I don't know. So now that has been by far to see someone who, you had as an 18-year-old now becoming a recognizable professional at 30, 31. And, you can talk to that person you can exchange ideas and you learn from that. I mean, that's been really great to me, because what I've been really gratified about, my students don't turn out to be like me. I don't turn out carbon copies, I do something really different. And that's great for me, because then I actually learn from them as well, which is part of what I've always felt was possible, though it doesn't happen as often as I like. It still happens. So that's been good.
Has there been anything that we've left out in the process?
Gee, I don't think so. This has been about the longest interview I've ever had.
But any closing comments you've got, would welcome them at this time? Something to think about?
No, I mean, it made me really think a lot about the program, and maybe I haven't fully grasped the historical line until I start talking about how long this has been going on. But I think back fondly to the real path makers in this process. Some of these men and women who, they had very, very little chance to succeed, but they did a spectacular job applying, and just the excitement I remember when they would come back and say, well, I didn't win, but I really had a good interview. I forgot who wrote The Catcher in the Rye. It's like, what? Yeah, I just couldn't remember. It's just like the English pages you can't remember. It's just like, So, but those are kind of fond memories I have of it. And I actually was walking down the hallway about 3 weeks ago, and one of those students came in the building, and she said, "I've been looking for you. I've come up here every couple years," and she had like her 4 homeschooled kids with her. They were all like, from ages 8 through 5 or something, and they were all surrounding her. And said, "Oh, I just wanted to come see how you were doing. I just wanted to let you know I'm still hanging in there. I'm homeschooling my children." And she was one who I thought she had a really good shot, and she did well. I tried to convince her that she wasn't ready to go to graduate school in the year after, and she did, and she went to the University of Illinois, and she went a year, and she did fine, but she just wasn't ready to stay. And so I think eventually she'll go back and get her degree, but I think that's a key item for a lot of students. I mean, I tell them, 4 years of university study, it's not bad to take a break. I mean, given longevity as we know it today, I mean, you have enough time to take a year and maybe travel a little bit and get a little bit out of you've been going to school since you were 5 years old. And maybe it might give you a little bit of a, revival by taking a year off and then coming back. I said, that's what I did. And I was really ready to come back, but I wasn't ready to start graduate school right after undergraduate. It just seemed like, I need to take a break a little bit. And so some of them have done that. Some of them, of course, not. I mean, they go and do what they want to do. And so, but those early ones, even before Shannon, and Shannon was a success, and we weren't having very many successes early. We'd get a Truman, and that Truman would tend to then apply for the roads and wouldn't get it. And but we had a bunch of people in English that did those applications and history, and I think they did okay, and they came out of it with a really good attitude, and never forgot it. And that's all you can ask for. We wanted to change the student culture. We didn't worry too much about the faculty culture because that's much more entrenched. The faculty are going to change much more slowly than the students. But we wanted the students to know that they could compete. And I think we've succeeded with that.
But perhaps you've also done a little bit of the other two. The fact
I think we've made inroads.
I think the needle has moved a little on that.
We made inroads. And I think that our application for Phi Beta Kappa is certainly predicated, at least in part, on this program. I mean, that's the kind of thing we really would. I mean, we can get that at the university. I think that's something we really need to have. And we've had enough academic excellence and success to warrant that. The question is, there are certain key areas in any application like that have to be, at a certain level. And that's probably where, for whatever reason, we've had, I think there hasn't always been universal support for that, even in the faculty here. So I think that's changing. I think that, I know the students feel a whole lot more confident about their ability to succeed. When I first moved here, I thought, I have never lived around such an insecure set of individuals, they just feel like, well, I'm from there. I said, why are you apologizing for being in Oklahoma? I said, you have a lot of unique characteristics that you need to, embrace. I mean, so what if I'm from New York? Do I think New York's automatically better than Oklahoma? No. So it's what's individual to the place. And I don't hear that as much. I mean, I still hear it a little bit, but that's like any place. I mean, I'm from Texas. I mean, they're going to have that too. But I think that the student culture has changed in regard to this issue. They do feel they can compete. They do apply, and they've demonstrated they deserve to be in that pool of applicants. So that's probably been a really, really nice thought for Bob and I to have, and it's motivated me to keep working on the project.
Ed, thank you very much.
All
Appreciate it.
right.